Hey guys, it's Luke and Sean's channel. Today I'm going to be showing off my branded Skull Servant build. This is just a build I've been toying with. It's not really set in stone right now, but I'm just super excited to show it off because I feel like there's a lot of good ideas in this. I kind of just put the side deck together sort of last minute, mostly because I don't really use the side deck for this. I kind of just use this with all other cards from my other decks. So let's not wait any further. Let's just check out branded Skull Servants. Of course, we have the main man himself. We have 2 copies of Skull Servant. I gave into the pressure and only ran 2. I love running 3 just because Skull Servant is just an absolute chad in himself. But yeah, 2 copies of Skull Servant, the vanilla, is all you really need for this build and pretty much most builds. You definitely need 3 copies of King of the Skull Servants though. Now, for those of you who don't know, like the main gimmick of Skull Servants is King of the Skull Servant is pretty much to retrain a Skull Servant, but he is ridiculously fucking cool because with King of Skull Servant, the original attack of this card becomes the number of King of Skull Servants and Skull Servant cards in the graveyard times 1,000. And all of your white cards, like your Wightbaking, Wightprincess, whatever, they all get named Skull Servant while in the graveyard. So this guy can get up to ridiculous amount of attacks, and it's pretty much sort of an OTK sort of strategy where you get this guy up to a ridiculous amount of attacks and swing for game. So 3 copies of King of the Skull Servants is very important. All builds should run 3 King of the Skull Servants. At least 2. You never run at just 1. I really like to run at 3 because I think this deck is fucking hilarious for bringing them out. Especially you can bring more than 1 out on your board. So 3 copies is definitely right for this build. Wightbaking, I like to run at 3. This is probably one of the best fucking support cards you can get for any archetype. I'm so happy they treated Skull Servants right with this. Honestly, this was like the only good card in Blazing Vortex. But Wightbaking is very good because, of course, he has the same thing where his name becomes Skull Servant was in the graveyard. And he also kind of has like a bit of a battle trick in the sense that if a level 3 or lower zombie monster you control be destroyed by a battle or card effect, you can discard this card instead. But his main effect is that if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add 2 monsters with different names from your deck to your hand, except Wightbaking, that are either Skull Servant or specifically Skull Servant in their text, then discard 1 card. Which is fucking insane because the main sort of combo thing you want with this is if you get Wightbaking into the graveyard, you can add like Prince and Wightprince and Wightprincess, and then you get to discard Wightprince to dump a Skull Servant and a Lady in White. So 3 copies of Wightbaking essential for any Skull Servant build you'll ever see. And slightly controversial, I know, but I like to play decks kind of unconventionally anyways, but 3 copies of Wightprince. You might want to put this down to 2 depending on your preference playstyle, but I like to run it at 3. So with Wightprince, as I mentioned earlier, if this card is sent to the graveyard, you send 1 Skull Servant and 1 Lady in White from your hand or deck to the graveyard. Also Wightprince, you can banish him along with 2 other Skull Servants in the graveyard to special summon a King of Skull Servant from your deck. Which of course is very, very good, and as you know, Wightprince's name is Skull Servant in the graveyard as well. So 3 copies of Wightprince, you can cut it down to 2, I don't really mind, depends on your preference. 2 copies of Wightprincess, I really like Wightprincess, mostly because of her battle trick is very good. Because during your opponent's turn, either player's turn, you can send this card from your hand or field to the graveyard, and all monsters currently in the field lose attack and defense equal to their own level / rank times 300 until the end of the turn. And it's very good that it involves level and rank because you know, a lot of cards just use the battle trick for levels, but having rank as well is very, very good. And also Wightprincess is named Skull Servants in the graveyard, and also if this card is normal or special summoned, you can send 1 Wightprince from your deck to the graveyard, which I find very good. Some people cut Wightprincess altogether, some people don't run it at 2, they run at 1. I like 2, I think it's a nice little ratio, but of course this deck is more than welcome to criticism because again, this is more sort of a casually sort of fun one. I haven't built this to be ultra competitive right now, but I still do really like this deck, and I'm really excited to show you guys some more ideas. 2 copies of Lady in White. Lady in White's pretty much just fodder to get the full effect of Wightprince. I wouldn't really be too necessarily worried about her other effects, which is just face up level 3 or lower zombie type monsters you control, except herself cannot be destroyed by battle and are unaffected by effects of spell and trap cards. But you know, 2 copies of Lady in White is very, very good. Just to get the full effect, get another Skull Servant in the graveyard so that you can boost up your King of Skull Servant to like really good heights. Alright, 2 copies of Fallen of Albaz. You guys already know the purpose of this guy. He's used for branded fusion. So it's very essential to run 2 copies, because if you're using branded fusion for him, you need 1 to be in the deck to actually fully resolve. And also, if one of these guys is banished, you're kind of fucked. So running 2 is very, very good. I recommend running 2 Fallen of Albaz in any branded deck that you decide to build. And I never really met a full branded deck. Me and Sean like kind of mixing it up with other different archetypes. So 2 copies of Fallen of Albaz for this deck I find to be very, very essential, along with 3 copies of Aluber. Aluber is very, very good. The reason why I run 3 is because you know, the TCG has been way nicer to branded than Master Duel has. So 3 copies of Aluber is very good. Aluber is the searcher for branded fusion or any of your branded spell or traps, but we most just use it for branded fusion. He's also a Dharc, which works well with branded fusion. One thing I like to do with branded fusion is I like to fuse Fallen of Albaz with Aluber, send it to the graveyard, bring out Lubellion, and then I can use these 2 to go into Masquerade, which is really good because burn damage is fucking amazing. And you can only do that because Aluber is a Despia monster. So 3 copies of Aluber, very, very good for this deck. We're going to start off with some branded spells. I have 3 copies of Branded Fusion. You guys probably already know what this does. You know, Fusion summons 1 fusion monster mentioned the Fallen of Albaz from the extra deck, using monsters from your deck or field as fusion material. So 3 copies of Branded Fusion, very, very important. So this deck, I don't know if you can play it on Master Duel. I'm not really a Master Duel player. I know Branded Fusion is getting limited, which is unfortunate. But I'm sure if people still want to play around with more different branded spells / traps, I don't run a lot of them. So if you want to find some other slot fillers for branded fusion, be my guest, no problem at all. I run 3 copies of Branded Opening as well. Branded Opening is just the way that we get to discard a card and then special summon our Aluber, and then our Aluber is able to search us our Branded Fusion. So 3 copies of Branded Opening. Again, Master Duel might be different, I don't fully know, but Sean and I will be in the comments section anyways if you guys want advice on what to replace it with, or if you guys want to shout out suggestions yourself, please do. 2 copies of Super Poly, because I have Super Poly targets in the extra deck, and Super Poly is just an amazing card, so definitely 2 copies of that. Some people might not run this engine at all, but I just love it because I really deeply associate it with Skull Servants. That's running 2 copies of Mass Change 2. Mass Change 2, for the cost of discarding a card, you can target 1 face-up monster you control, send it to the graveyard, and then you can bring out a masked hero, which of course is going to be Darklaw. This works so well with Skull Servants for so many reasons. One being that you get to discard, and then the Skull Servants get to use their effects when they're discarded. 2 being that almost all of our Skull Servant monsters are dark, so you're bringing out Darklaw no matter what. And the fact that you get to discard a monster from your hand to use their effect, and also a monster on field gets sent to the graveyard, they get to use their effect too, and also just great to have Darklaw as well. Mass Change 2 I find to be super cool for this deck, I highly recommend it. Now, 2 copies of Burial from a Different Dimension. So, as I mentioned earlier, the whole combo with Wightprince that it can banish itself along with 2 other Skull Servants from the grave, especially some of the King of Skull Servant from the deck. Problem with that being is that you lose a bunch of your attack with your King of Skull Servant that you special summon onto the field. Because of that, you're pretty much losing 3,000 attack. So Burial from a Different Dimension is a good way to target up to 3 banished monsters and then you return them to your graveyard. So it's good to get those banished Skull Servants back into your graveyard to really bulk up your King of Skull Servants. 1 copy of 1 for 1, pretty self-explanatory. Our boss monster is a level 1, so why not play 1 for 1. It's very, very good. Also, you get to discard a monster from your hands and get the full effect off of that. Foolish Burial, this is a zombie deck, so of course Foolish Burial is necessary to send one monster from dead to the graveyard. Great for sending Wightbaking or Wightprince. Call by the Grave is great just because this is kind of leaning towards a combo deck, so we don't want to get interrupted. Now this is what I was talking about when I was saying that this deck is pretty much good on its own. It doesn't I don't necessarily usually have it with a side deck. I run 2 copies of Twin Twisters in the main. You can side this, it's fine, it's no problem, but I think this really speaks out to the Master Duel players who don't have a side deck. So 2 Twin Twisters in the main is better than most other your spell and trap removal, because Twin Twisters you get to discard a card, which of course will be your Skull Servant monsters, so and get their effects off them. So 2 copies of Twin Twisters is very, very good. Going round it off with the traps now, 3 copies of Imperm. Imperm is just a great monster effect negate. And also a cool little floodgate. There can be only 1. So yeah, most of the time we only want King of the Skull Servant on the field because he's the big guy that gets a shitload of attack that's able to kill your opponent. So 3 copies of There Can Be Only 1 is definitely very, very good for the build because all the branded stuff like Mirrorjade's a worm, Lubellion's a dragon and stuff like that. I find also Masquerade's a fiend. I find There Can Be Only 1 can be a great floodgate to really mess up your opponent and not really mess us up at all. So 3 copies of that in the main. Going into the extra deck now, I'm going to start off with the basics of the branded stuff. Of course, you run 1 copy of Mirrorjade. Mirrorjade is a really good boss monster. This was like the boss monster for branded before, of course, branded got like so much support and they can just run Dragoon and all the other stuff. But Mirrorjade's great, uses Fallen of Albaz and 1 Fusion, Synchro, XZ or Link monster for its material, and then it's able to bring out this big 3000 attack guy who has a quick effect Banish on the field. So Mirrorjade definitely central on it 1. 1 copy of Lubellion. This is the most likely target you're going to bring out with your branded fusion because Lubellion, for the cost of discarding a card, it's able to fusion summon a level 8 or lower fusion monster from the extra deck by shuffling in cards among your graveyard and field into the deck. So this is pretty much a 1-card combo Lubellion to go into a Lubellion and a Masquerade as I mentioned earlier. But of course, possibilities are fucking endless with this, but 1 copy of Lubellion is very, very good. I like to run 2 copies of Albion. I find Albion to be very, very good, mostly because we're not too worried about the stuff that we banish from our graveyard, considering that we run 2 copies of Burrow from a different dimension. So 2 copies of Albion, when he's brought out, he kind of works as a miracle fusion, which is great. And also 1 copy of Mirrorjade, not necessarily a branded sort of card, but Mirrorjade is a very, very nice, not necessarily a floodgate, but pretty much what this guy does if he's on the field, if your opponent fucking breeds, he has to pay 600. So I think Masquerade is very, very good for the build. Definitely run that little package right there. Of course, our Dharc Law, because we run Mass Change 2. Dharc Law is very good. You can run that too, but I tried to make space in this build, so 1 copy of Dharc Law is very, very good. I also run our Super Poly targets, Mudragon to Swamp, Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, and Garura. Pretty self-explanatory Super Poly targets. They're just like generic fusion monsters that are good for kind of like wiping your opponent's board with Super Poly in a way that they can't react. Now, since we run a lot of level 1 monsters, I also run Link Karibo and also Relinquish Anima. So not only are these good because they use level 1 monsters, they're also very good because the level 1 monsters we mostly use, they get effects when they're in the graveyard. So we're kind of like bricking a bit, or even if it's in a later game and all we have is the likes of Wightbaking. Normal summon it, link it off of Link Karibo, and then you get Wightbaking's effect in graveyard. And also Relinquish Anima is very good for kind of like stealing monsters. It's kind of one of these cards that is like very good, but people just kind of forget about it, especially when they're like not really considering their zones. So Relinquish Anima at 1 and Link Karibo at 1. Since we're majority Dharcs in this build, Dharc the Dark Charmer Gloomy I think is very, very good for this build. And we like to discard a lot, and for problematic monsters it's good to have some Knightmare cards. If your deck is pretty much a discard based, like Dark World or Skull Servant, you're going to want the Knightmare cards in your extra deck. Most just because that they get to use their effects by discarding a card, like Phoenix, discard a card, pop a spell trap, Cerberus, discard a card, destroy a special monster, Unicorn, discard a card, shuffle a monster into the deck. Discarding is a good way to get your Skull Servant effects to pop off, so definitely one of each of these Knightmare cards is very good to round off our extra deck. I'm only going to talk briefly about like side deck options that I have, mostly just because I put this side deck together last minute because I don't really use a side deck for this build, but here's just some suggestions that I throw out there. Since we run both lights and darks in this build, running one copy each of the bestials could be very, very good. Because, like, well, they're brilliant monsters, but also the fact that they're also big, beefy sort of dudes. Considering that this is an OTK deck, bringing out the more big monsters we can, the merrier. Definitely run one copy each of the bestials. Not necessary for every build, but I find that just having them on the side makes me feel a lot safer. So one copy of each of the bestial I think would be very, very good side deck option. And since we're a graveyard heavy deck, 3 copies of Artifact Lancia I think to be very, very good. Depending on the matchup as well, this can be crippling, especially if you're going against Kashtira. So 3 copies of Lancia I find to be very good. Combo decks are heavy, and we also have no problem sort of removing big tokens if it gets to that situation. So 2 copies of Nibiru I find to be very, very good. And also, it's always good to have some sort of kaiju in your side deck, and I find 3 copies of Lava Golem. Honestly, Lava Golem quickly became my favorite kaiju option since people started playing it when cash format really first came into light. But I find Lava Golem to be good all around. I try to run Lava Golem in almost every side deck I actually build, just because it's that good. It gets rid of 2 of your opponent's problematic monsters rather than just the 1. And of course, speaking of amazing side deck cards, evenly matched, run at 3. I do not mind. This deck goes second anyways, but one crippling way to destroy your opponent's board when you're going second is evenly matched. 3 copies of it in the side deck I find to be very good. Of course, there's all different kind of floodgates you can play. I know Zombie World can be a very good floodgate depending what your opponent's playing. It really locks down a lot of decks like Rikas and stuff like that. But I kind of feel like it interferes with there can be only one. But there's loads of different ways you can play this deck. There's no one right way. So definitely play around with this build if you want. I think that there's loads of sort of different kind of ways you can interpret it, build it, and leave suggestions because I like to hear them all. This is just the way I like to play it. Again, this is kind of last minute, but I still find it to be a fun, cool sort of build. So hopefully you guys liked it. I'm really happy the way it turned out. So yeah, I think that's very good. We already did a live duel with this, which is probably on the channel by now, where I played this deck. And I did a quick little 6-second deck profile, but this is nice to kind of like go in depth of what these cards can do. And of course, the comment section might be livid. With some of the ratios, that's fine. It's cool. You can play whatever way you want. This is just a nice little skeleton, but no pun intended, of what the deck can be. So please check out all the other deck profiles on the channel. Let us know what you think. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Thanks for watching.